Good morning, everybody. Very nice to see you all virtually this morning. Welcome to one of our series of webinars being held jointly with London and Partners on why London for data and AI. And if you haven't seen the report that we have published recently on London being an innovation hub for health and life sciences, in particular data and AI, you will see a link to that report, and I urge you to have a look at it, because when you do, you'll see how the UK has made great investment in this sector over the last few years, in particular AI, with funding initiatives such as the NHSX AI Lab and the MedTech funding mandate and others. London in particular has had a lot of interest in terms of investment, with London-based companies raising over £3 billion of investment over the last 2 years. MedCity is the health and life science cluster for London, boosting innovation by supporting companies to connect and be part of the thriving community. And we work with London and Partners to provide a one-stop shop for companies looking to land. It is with great excitement that I would like to introduce you to Huma today, because they are a complete exemplar of some tremendous growth that they have seen. And the FT recently named them as Europe's fastest growing healthcare company, recently raising $130 million to support its work on development of AI for medical research and clinical trials. And I'm really pleased to say that today we have Ada and Mats from Huma talking to us about their journey. And before I go ahead to introduce them, just a few housekeeping things that we would love for you to be very interactive on this session. So if you do have questions, or comments, and please do put them in chat, and we will go to those towards the end of the session. The first part of the session today will be a presentation from Ada and Matt, followed by a panel discussion, and then we'll open up to Q&A. So I'm Neelam Patel, Chief Exec of MedCity, very delighted to have both of these fantastic individuals, which I'll leave them to introduce themselves to you. And at this point, I will hand over to Matt, I think, who will be sharing his slides.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Neelam, for having us here. It's a pleasure to talk about everything that we've been doing at Huma. My name is Matt. I'm head of R&D and clinical strategy at Huma, and I've been with the company for about 3 years. Prior to that, I was practicing as a clinician, as a cardiologist in the NHS. I did my training here in London, and I've been living in London for over 30 years. So London is very dear to my heart, and I look forward to speaking to you about the benefits of being in London and working in London with all the opportunities and partners that are there. Ida.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much, Nina, for the intro. And Mert, you and I have definitely got that memo on the blue shirt outfit for the Huma talk today. It's a real pleasure to meet you. I'm Ida Sefi. I'm Chief Commercial Officer here at Huma. I've been with Huma for over a year now, but I was a previous customer of Huma, so I've known the team here and Dan, our CEO and founder, for quite some time. About 6 years ago, I utilized their solution and tool in particular for running some research trials, in particular for rare type of cancer in pediatric patients. I've been watching ever since very closely, and in the last year that I've joined, we've really pulled together and pivoted our attention and focus on ensuring that we're able to provide some solutions for the global pandemic that hit the entire world, of course, early beginning of last year, and some of the advances from then. So I look forward to sharing some of those thoughts and experiences with you.
Right, I think We will start with the initial presentation and then open up the Q&A. But I'll let you start, Ida.
Cheers, thank you, Mert. So what we're about as a company and as Huma has always been consistent, and that has not changed. And we've been around for about, I would say about 10 years now. I think our anniversary is coming up in August. And the key vision and mission that we focus on is powering proactive and predictive health. Our head offices are here in the UK. We are also in the US, in Germany, and in China. Our clients and partners are ones that are both in the provision of care, but as well as research and development. So some key academic partners and also some life science companies that we work very closely with in some development work, which we'll touch on in a bit. We've got some key shareholders there that you can see, all very strategically partnered with us, in particular with the same mission and same vision as us. And then, of course, we're very focused on ensuring that we have the regulatory credentials required in order for us to operate in the geographies that we do. So a bit of a snapshot of our company as a whole. As I mentioned, we're a digital health company, more of a platform that exists in several different verticals in care and in research. Some of our hospital at home projects in the last year, of course, have taken huge traction. COVID acted as an accelerator for hospital at home solutions, virtual wards, and remote care for patients as a whole globally. Our experience here in the UK helped us to expand into Germany, where we signed a national contract with the Health Minister of Germany. Also here in the UK, of course, mostly in London, where our home base is, and in partnership with UAE as well. We managed to deploy at scale. One of the key things that we were able to do is deploy at scale. And we went live at over 100 clinics just in a couple of days, both here and in Germany, across primary and in secondary care. Some of the excellent results we've seen in the last year is indeed that patients actually do want to interact with digital health platforms. And we had excellent adherence to the application of over 90%. And the thought around the older generation not wanting to interact with it was indeed not quite the case. We had over 40% of the total population within the age range of about 60 and 80 years. We are also powering some of the largest virtual clinical trials and studies. As mentioned, we exist in the verticals of both care and also research. And as Nina just mentioned earlier, we have been awarded Europe's fastest growing healthcare company just earlier this year. I thought to touch on some of the outcomes of our hospital at home solution, in particular during COVID. We saw some excellent results, and I think that's what makes it quite unique to speak about what our experience has been, because we have been operating in the space for quite some time, and to be able to talk about what we actually achieved, the actual impact that it had to some of the care providers and patients is really key to us. We managed to reduce over 30% of unnecessary admissions to the provision of care to hospitals, where indeed they were under a lot of stress and burden during the pandemic as a whole. We managed to showcase that we could double the clinical capacity for clinicians through the use of a very simple platform and application, where the clinicians were therefore able to manage patients remotely a lot faster, a lot better, more seamlessly, and also safer. Patients also found the app super easy to use. This is important to us. We're extremely patient-centric. We design our applications so that it's a delightful experience for the patients that are going to experience it and interact with it. And the same for the clinicians, that it is easy. It is actually aiding their decision-making as a whole. So I mentioned some of these key impacts that we managed to have at scale, 3 national projects, and we spoke to several other countries and have shared our learnings across many other countries actually that we have learned within our 3 national deployments. Our partnership and collaboration with the National Health Service was key. We co-created many of these pathways and protocols that were deployed across the UK, and in doing so, really focused on what the pain points were that we could ensure that we were able to support through the platform itself. Actually, one of those things was helping to provide the devices, the pulse oximeters, and we managed to deploy over 1 million pulse oximeters both across the UK and in Germany. As I mentioned, going live in several different sites in a matter of days was really quite important for us. We managed to work at speed and scale and not compromise any of the excellent work we've done with regards to both the application as well as the platform. And the other key deliverables, which I mentioned already, of doubling the clinical capacity and really reducing the number of admissions required in that patient pathway. So we had some coverage in the news and we had some feedback from our patients and the users of our tools, the clinicians. And those are very, very important to us. Being able to actually talk about what you're able to do as a company versus what you have actually done as a company is really important. We have found that by listening to our customers, really collaborating and partnering with them, we were able to provide a product that actually managed to create the impact that they both wanted and also that allowed the patients to be in a better place. So you'll see two of the quotes there from our patient testimonials, really feeling like they had the doctor with them all of the time by interacting with the application. There's a fantastic system in our application which allows to reassure the patients that their data that they input has been seen and they're only contacted should they need to be by the clinician. And they had a lot of comfort having the application, and also it alleviated their anxiety. The clinical teams were really happy with the way in which the virtual wards worked and the referral of the patients both into primary and into the secondary care system so that they could reduce the number of phone calls they were on trying to get the data remotely from patients, but actually having a seamless way of having that, but not just in a dump of data, in a delightful way that again for them, it aided them in their decision making. We had some independent evaluation of our application and its use by NHSX. We're expecting some more of that to come up in the next few months as we have managed to power 50% of the digital solutions for the COVID remote patient monitoring here in the UK. So we're really looking forward to seeing that. Our clinicians at West Herts were on Channel 4 talking about how the application works, again, so that others can learn and use similar sort of methodologies. And as mentioned, the virtual wards and its impact both in safety were also further showcased within the news. Mert, I'll hand over to you to go through some of the detail of how it actually works and some of the advantages and share with the team the case studies around which we've managed to have greater impact. Over to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it has taken us a long time to to get to where we are today, you know, building a solid infrastructure to be able to deploy solutions across multiple different countries at scale rapidly in a way that is that can be tailored to different conditions and diseases very quickly was a challenge that we've been trying to solve over the last 6-7 years, and we've learned a lot. You know, I think being in London, working with top teaching hospitals and partners, and testing the solution and learning from our mistakes. And in fact, you know, we had to build and rebuild this entire platform 3 times over in order to get it to the scale, to the way that it is today. But it's almost made up of these different sort of Lego blocks, and it's highly configurable and modular. It's pure software. We can create care plans and study protocols on the application very quickly and connect the patients and participants to clinical teams and research teams where they have access to a visual dashboard and real-time data flow, and they have the ability to, of course, intervene when necessary. So we tried to really leverage the learnings from some of our partners like Apple in terms of, you know, the user-centric design and the ease of onboarding, the consenting, and the remote e-signatures. And this really allows us to not only provide remote patient monitoring solutions, but also use the same platform that we've built to power clinical trials and studies. And one of the very interesting functionalities that we have is this helper proxy functionality. Of course, not everyone has a smartphone or tech savvy, so we want to be as inclusive as possible. So you have the ability to add a helper, a carer, a family member who can essentially enter data on your behalf and share it with clinical teams. And as I mentioned, not only are we collecting data around symptoms and vital signs and potential deterioration, but we're also trying to educate the patients and empower them to take care of their own health. And we all know very well that, you know, if we can empower the patients and activate the patients, then the outcomes will improve. So the educational content that can be tailored for different diseases to support patients to manage expectations throughout their journey with the right content is also very important. And of course, having that continuous connectivity to care teams through telemedicine functionalities, messaging functionalities is absolutely key. And what's important for the clinical teams is, of course, the prioritization, right? If you're and that really came to light during our sort of national COVID-19 projects and the virtual wards. And we had all these patients who had tested positive and were self-isolating at home. We provided them with our applications and also shipped pulse oximeter devices to their homes. And if you can imagine, if you have 1,000 patients and you have 100 of them that are deteriorating, how do you prioritize one over the other? How do you decide which patient to bring in, which one to reassure? And I think having that visibility on the data, on the symptoms and vital signs in real time really enables that. And hence why we're seeing some of the stats we're seeing in terms of the efficacy and doubling the hospital capacity and freeing up beds and so on. And of course, all the data that we collect, it can both be integrated into healthcare systems, but also exported with the click of a button, either at patient level, cohort level. It's all structured, FHIR compatible, and can be utilized alongside EMR data for research and analytics. Just going further into some case studies. So COVID is not the only therapeutic area that we operate in, and one of the main issues that the pandemic has caused is the backlog on elective surgical and interventional procedures, particularly for cardiac patients. And as you know, the waiting lists are massive at the moment. And what we've done in collaboration with Royal Brompton is to provide our application to all the patients who are waiting to have elective surgery, to be able to monitor their symptoms, their vital signs, just to detect any potential deterioration early, so we can bring their surgical dates forward and intervene as and when needed. And we're together with NHS England, we're now trying to push that at a national scale. But already what we've done there, we have about 1,000 patients on the application, and you see some of the stats at the bottom. The 10% identified as being at risk of deterioration and had their operation dates move forward. And having that visibility is really quite important. Another great example of why being in London is so great for a tech company is our work with Discover Now. We're part of this consortium together with Imperial College Health Partners, AstraZeneca, Google, and others. And what we're trying to do there is essentially fundamentally change the care pathways for patients with type 2 diabetes and trying to improve the long-term outcomes, reduce complications by providing, again, that digital connectivity and solution to these patients. And we've rolled this out across the Northwest London. And what we're trying to do is to use this as an exemplar for scaling up this technology across the entire country, and it's been a great journey there. And of course, we talked about using the same platform that we have for use of clinical trials. And today we're supporting one of the largest virtual clinical studies for one of the COVID-19 vaccines. And again, it kind of goes to show everything that we've done up to this date in terms of the infrastructure that we've built, the scalable technology that we've created in terms of how it is cloud agnostic, and that it can be launched across multiple countries with the right regulatory requirements. And this is a study that we're doing across 7, 8 different countries in 8 different languages across 2 different continents with 30,000 participants that we're recruiting, and it's already live, and we've started recruiting patients there to understand efficacy and safety of the vaccines. And again, this was not possible before, to be able to run these types of clinical trials without any sites, without the need for EDCs and so on. So this is a completely new way of running clinical trials, and of course, pandemic has significantly affected the clinical trial space there as well, and we're trying to help in that aspect with our technology. And one other interesting study that we're doing, again, collaborating with University of Cambridge there, is to really understand the natural history and progression of COVID-19 by deploying our technology across a cohort of 2,400 participants who have been involved in an observational study. And there is 15 years worth of retrospective data on these individuals. And we started collecting prospective digital data, digital phenotypic data on these individuals. And we're now analyzing this data to potentially build new pre-symptomatic prediction models for early detection of COVID-19, and also enriching this data set with primary, secondary care data of these participants, as well as the COVID-19 testing data. And it's a great AI project initiative that we've taken on together with Cambridge. And finally, I talked about prioritization. And what we've done, again, is to develop a severity risk score. We've done this in collaboration with Johns Hopkins. Again, we use primary, secondary care data from the patients, utilizing some of the information from the UK Biobank as well, that we're partnered with, to build a model that can basically predict the likelihood of an individual requiring ventilation, ending up in ICU, and having severe complications from COVID-19. And again, when it comes to prioritization of patients, if you, as I mentioned, if you have 10 patients who are deteriorating, how do you decide which patient to call first, to intervene and bring into the hospital? And these types of risk prediction scores and algorithms can be extremely helpful in terms of creating more efficiency within the healthcare systems. And that's about it from us. I think this is just a quick summary of the work that we've been doing over the last 12 to 18 months. It's been quite a journey. We've been working day in, day out as an entire company, and I think we went from 80 people to 160 people, and trying to help the pandemic response across multiple different geographies. And what we've done here in the UK previously, having worked with the NHS, with top academic centers in the UK, really gave us that credibility to go and sign this national project in Germany, or expand our COVID-19 solution that was tested here in London and in the greater London region with NHSX and others, the virtual ward concept, and how we can take that to other geographies globally, like the UAE being a great example of that. So I'll stop here and hand it over to Nilam.
Thank you very much, Matt and Ada, for that incredible and fascinating overview of your journey. I want to just encourage participants to put their comments and questions on their chat so that we can come back to them once I've asked my questions, actually. So I'm going to kick off, Matt and Ada, and before I do, however, great, just making sure that the slides were off the screen. A few things struck me. One of the things that struck me, Matt, that you said, that both of you said, was how over your journey you almost had to build and rebuild your platform 3 times, and that's, I mean, that requires a lot of persistence, but also the ability to have partnerships and you know, an ecosystem that allows you to do that. You talked a little bit about how working in London has opened doors to other markets. Can you just home in on that a little bit? So how has the ecosystem in London made a difference for your journey? Tell me a little bit about the hospitals and how you, you know, got involved in the institutions. What did that take, and what was the outcome?
I mean, we very much started in London, right? We're based in Westminster. And we started in a sort of small basement with about 15, 20 people back 8-9 years ago. And the first hospital that we worked with was the Royal Free. And at that time, we were trying to help and tackle rare diseases. And I think being in London really enabled us, you know, once we've done the first project with Royal Free, you know, there is that great academic network across London with the top teaching hospitals. I mean, I studied and grew up here in London, and it's almost like a community. Everybody knows each other. You know, when you're talking to one, you know, cardiologist at Royal Free, and you know, it's you know, everybody knows each other within that community, and that really has helped us to expand from, you know, one center to another, demonstrating outcomes and a use case in one center and trying to replicate that in another, and that's how we sort of built the platform, essentially, you know, by making mistakes and learning from the mistakes, and but it took a long time. So I think one thing I can say is that patience is really important in the space, and getting to a solid infrastructure that one is comfortable with in terms of expanding that globally and launching it in other geographies. You know, that is what London has provided for us, that test bed to enable that, essentially.
And if I can probably add to that a little bit, Neelam, I've also been around London for over 20 years and in the healthcare space. And I think one of the key things about London and the partnerships and collaborations that can be developed is that you have open-minded, forward-thinking academic partners to sort of university hospitals, and where a lot of research is being undertaken. And that sort of research requires the right sort of investment, and not always does it have the investment it requires. So if there are ways in which we can create efficiencies in the way research is delivered, or create the opportunity for more patients to participate, for more clinicians to be able to run these, then the faster we will all reach the joined outcome, which is what's the best thing for patients. How can we be a little bit clever about stuff? Yeah, you know, let's be proactive, let's be predictive. But it's got to be said that it took the pandemic to accelerate probably what we would have done in the next 5 years in the last 12 to 18 months, as Mert said, you know, because people were forced to make a change. They were forced to make a decision about how they were going to deliver care in the way that we've delivered, continue in research in the way that we've been able to continue. And I think to your point, Neelam, you know, this requires partnerships with the right sort of people. We've been in the space for quite some time, but the London partners are incredible. As Matt mentioned, we started off at Royal Free. I was a previous customer in a private space for the team, and also trialing a few different bits and pieces on how we can deliver the virtual research piece, and listening and molding accordingly is super important. So people like yourselves in MedCity being able to create those connections with the correct and right-minded people is so key. But London is bursting with all of that, and so a great place to be as a startup to develop and grow.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the shout out for MedCity in London and partners, which absolutely, if there are no existing connections, and that's absolutely what we're there for. The other thing that also struck me, and Ada, you talked about, which was surprising to me actually, how many patients had interacted with the platform, and also what you said, Matt, about the data and the work that you've been doing with Discover Now. I mean, those are two areas that I think if you're in a data-enabled sort of technology framework, can be quite daunting. How much is the diversity element of patients and the population in London important to the trials and the work that you've done? And second to that, or second question relating to that, what about the trusted data environment? It's sort of evolving now, but what have you found in London that has really pushed the real world evidence aspect of your work forward? So two things, one on diversity and population, second around data and access.
I'll touch on the diversity and hand over to Mert on the data and access, or both if you like. Mert will give it both a go. This is where partnership is so key. So majority of the care is provided through the National Health Service. And of course, there's some private partners that also play a part. But in order to reach that diversity, you need to be really open-minded to the pathways and protocols that currently are in existence, as opposed to come in and try and enforce what you'd like to see as a tech company or a digital platform. Our aim is to enable the current protocols and pathways that exist, enable the adherence to those, enable everyone to participate, to the point that Mert made earlier. Creating this proxy was on the back of ensuring that we were able to care for even more patients and allow them the opportunity to input data, even if they weren't able to themselves. So actually, with some of our deployments with the National Health Service, which of course is a key partnership here for us to ensure that diversity, was to look across all of those, excuse me, spectrums of primary and secondary care, as opposed to before it was rare disease and in tertiary care. Here we opened up those doors even further and ensured that we ran in parallel with simple systems such as normal telemedicine alongside the digital platforms, and then showcased how one could make a difference to the other, and gently started to make that move across, so that we can really have that impact for as many patients as possible. Of course, when you're partnered with the NHS, what you're doing there in terms of the data security piece is all embedded in the relationship that you have with them, and ensuring that we meet those credentials accordingly, and are able to deliver it safely, and getting the buy-in from the safety officers, from the allied health executives as well, and across London and also across the UK actually. Matt?
Yeah, no, thank you, Ida. Absolutely. I think diversity is extremely important, especially when you're working with data to kind of build these types of predictive algorithms that we're trying to build and launch in the clinical space. We can't be working with data that is biased, right? And if you have an algorithm that can detect severity of COVID-19 infection, then and you want to launch that in other geographies, and that diversity piece becomes extremely important. And London and the UK really provides that with that diversity, which is incredible. And of course, the opportunity to participate in the type of consortiums and the projects like Discover Now, And that's a great example of how we can leverage data to understand care pathways better and improve them. And I mean, I had never seen before, you know, the being able to access primary and secondary care data of 2-3 million patients through the Discover Now project to really analyze these care pathways together with the partners that are involved in that, and identify specific shortcomings and pain points, and trying to then incorporate, you know, an intervention in the form of a digital solution. So I think that is extremely key. And for me, in order to understand disease progression and prognostication in general, you know, everything that we've been doing so far has been very much snapshots, right? Snapshot views of the patient, right? You know, we have all of this EMR data. We're going digital, electronic, but still, the patient comes in, gets their blood test. The patient goes in and has an X-ray, and it's always this snapshot view. And for us to really generate new insights and build new algorithms in this space, we need the full movie. You know, starting from genomics to EMR data, and a digital platform such as ours that can not only you know, collect data from with the technologies that we have, but we can also integrate third-party technologies that into this platform that can fill those gaps in between, and only then we will be able to sort of advance medicine and leverage the AI in terms of improving clinical outcomes.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to actually go to chat because there are a couple of questions that have popped up there. So I'll take a break from my questions, if I may, and I'll go to Laurent first. Actually, thank you for your question. It's quite a specific one. I don't know if both of you can see this on chat. So it's related to your approach to monitor the COVID vaccine study. And did you also have a control arm in your app? And if so, how did you handle the loss of control patients when they get vaccinated by the public health system? Very interesting question. Matt, do you want to have a go at that one?
So we don't have a control arm in our study. It's essentially a phase 4 safety study that we're running. And we're recruiting patients from vaccination sites, and they're just, as soon as they receive the vaccine, they get a leaflet and a link to download the application and start inputting data, essentially. So we're not using controls in this particular study, but there are some very interesting ways to generate controls now with the data. You know, synthetic control arms that can be generated, and we have partners that we're working on for other studies, but in this case we don't have controls.
Thank you for that. And just out of interest, when are you hoping to publish the data coming from that phase 4 study?
So we only went live with the phase 4 study about 2 months ago. So it's still early days, but as you can imagine, it's quite important in terms of all the, you know, informing the regulatory decisions and so on. So we've been working tirelessly for the last 3 months prior to that, getting the, you know, technology ready, setting up the study, and but it's still early days from us. But
thank you for that. One more question from chat, from Subhashish. Are you using artificial intelligence at all in the platform solution, and in what way? And the other question related to that is, are you partnering with AI companies to provide this functionality?
Yeah, absolutely. We are, and we are a big believer in partnership. So we definitely don't think that we can do it all by ourselves, and we do use some technologies in order to collect vital sign data at scale. One of the very interesting technologies that we're utilizing is a is a solution whereby you can essentially put your finger on the camera of your smartphone and it can measure your resting heart rate, 4 or 5 different features of heart rate variability, and also detect any rhythm abnormalities like atrial fibrillation. And this is a technology that is a Class 2A software as medical device, validated, CE marked, and it's live currently with patients in the UK, in UAE, who are utilizing our COVID-19 monitoring solutions and the virtual wards. And a technology like this can really help you scale, because if we have to send thousands, tens of thousands of wearables or hardware to monitor vital signs, it that always becomes a blocker in terms of scalability. So we're trying to use AI and leverage sensor-based technologies on the smartphone as much as possible. We are building and developing some of these risk prediction models on large retrospective data sets that can help us with the prioritization process, and the COVID-19 risk score is a great example of that, and is actually just being published in Nature in the next week or so. So I'll be more than happy to share that, or if you come to our website, you'll see that publication. And we have several different risk prediction models that we're developing, not just in COVID-19, but also in cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and others. And whenever we find a technology like that that can be useful for our patients, for our clinicians, that can provide actionable insights, then we're always open to partnering and integrating that technology into our platform. And we have an entire team that is, talking to and evaluating different, AI companies and technologies and their solutions. What's really important is the degree of validation, the clinical validation, and the CE marking, and the medical device classification, because there are a lot of tools out there, but if we don't have the right level of validation and the right credentials, then we wouldn't be able to launch this in a clinical setting and have the clinical teams that are relying on this information to make accurate clinical decisions. So accuracy and validation is very important for us.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that the relationships and the partnerships you have in the consortia and regulators, I'm sure, help with that as well, in this testbed approach that you've been talking about. In fact, I'm just going to the chat. Another question: what was the regulatory pathway involved to bring this platform to market, which is sort of slightly related to what I've just said? Is that a straightforward question to answer?
I probably wouldn't be the best person to answer that. We have an entire, dedicated regulatory team at Huma, and when you're operating in this healthcare space and clinical trial space, there's so much that needs to be done in terms of conformity, we started this process a long time ago, it's the CE marking, the FDA classification in the US for us to be able to operate there, getting the regulatory framework in place to launch solutions in China, in Middle East. So every new country that we go to has different regulatory challenges. Whether you can, in terms of storing and the data, storing the data, or taking the data out of the country. So lots of considerations with regards to, what servers you're going to use. And in some cases, we have to spin up brand new servers in a specific country and, operate on a private government cloud. Whereas, in a different country, we might use AWS or Google. So I think whenever you're trying to scale and go to different geographies, getting the regulatory team involved as early as possible is extremely important.
I was, I was going to say that was a big lesson I think both Mert and I learned in the last year was exactly that, getting the regs team involved as soon as possible. But I think the question is about how do you get there when you're just starting up, and how do you ensure you're going to continue to be safe? And I think one of the key things I would say, having joined the company a bit later, and some of the work had been done, but certainly not all, in particular going into new spaces, is know what you don't know, and ensure that you really are have a grip on, if you're involved in the data space, that you understand what that is. And if you don't understand that data safety and security piece, you have someone that can do that for you, and you partner to find out the best route for that in the region that you're in. And then the other piece is the MDR, the medical device regulatory platform. From my background, I understood the pharmaceutical platform really well as an operator in hospitals, some around the device, but certainly there's more, in particular when it starts to become remote and not in use within that hospital provider environment. It's now in the hands of patients independently utilizing it. So really, yeah, know what you don't know, ensure you're looking up in the right places, and go to the regulators and ask for help. They're very helpful, actually, and they'll be the ones that will guide you in the right direction.
And one very important thing is establish your intended use, very early on, because that governs everything at the end of the day.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for those people in the audience that want to know a bit more about the background of the UK environment, actually we're hosting another webinar with Digital Health London with NICE, as well as the Health Research Authority and the multi-agency support service with MHRA. So if you're interested in that in a bit more depth from the UK, then I'm sure Sarah and Katrina can put details of that in the chat for you to log on to. I'm just going to go back to my questions now, if I may. We've got a few minutes left, and one of the questions that I had, which was I was really interested in, you're talking about London having a community, and very often we talk about London and its science and its research and its tech and its institutions, but it also is about culture and community. So I wanted to ask you both, what does how important is that to your company, and as individuals, how do you unwind being in London? Both of you live in London. Tell us a bit about that.
Oh, well, Mert can put more color around it, as I've not been in the company as long as Mert has. Having said that, I joined, I've been in London for over 20 years, as I mentioned earlier, so I understand the culture quite well, and its speed at which it operates and the pace is just something else. And being able to ensure that you continually can keep up with it, if you like, or be leaders in a field like that, is keeping your finger on that pulse, requires for that sort of breakdown of the stress and barriers, and ensuring you really guard space to think and stop. I do that through sports. People do that through different measures. But interestingly, I joined completely remotely as we'd gone into lockdown, as I joined Huma. And being able to connect with Mert and many others who I met several months later, after things had eased in terms of lockdown in the office, was really interesting. But I'd been to the office a few times before, and the office and the culture of the office and the diversity of the people just in Huma reflects exactly what's going on in London so beautifully. People are friendly, they're open, and they're very diverse in every way, with several different interests. But I think what's really like-minded about all of us, which exists in London too, is this togetherness. Although we all move at speed, and although we're all very busy a lot of the time, actually, we're all on the same mission and vision. And in particular, when it comes to the healthcare industry as a whole, we're all very passionate about it. We have the national health system here in the UK, and in London in particular, the connectivity between that and the academic partners is just key. And for us to be able to leverage that within our own company as well, and vice versa, has been very important. So having that like-mindedness of the London community, the pace, the academics, and also the friendship and partnership and collaboration has really been important to us. And I think speaks volumes in the way that we run as a company as well.
Anything more to add, Matt?
I mean, not much to add. I decided it was just a big change for me, I suppose, when I first joined the company about 3 years ago, having been in the clinical healthcare space for over 10 years, and all of a sudden, being in the office with individuals from all kinds of different backgrounds, with different skills, and engineers and data scientists, and the legal team and commercials and regs, and I really enjoyed that, and that sort of togetherness, and that is being driven by your mission and vision. I think that's really important. And it's certainly something that I miss a lot as we are working sort of remotely. We're slowly going back to the office, but still it's not like how it used to be. But, hopefully we'll go back to that soon.
Yeah, but totally, and I think we all hope that. And I think what you've described is spot on, actually. In the more, as we go to more innovative technologies and, a different look of company, this sort of multi-sector convergence is really important, actually, what you described. And I think at least, and I'll be biased, obviously, because we're in London as well, but London offers that geography to do that very neatly. We're running out of time, and I wanted to ask you one other question, actually. And obviously, you've been in this game a bit longer than perhaps some of the other companies that are in the audience. Knowing what you do now and learning through the last 12 months, which I'm sure have been incredible for you in terms of learnings, what 3 things would you advise a company starting up in London? Both, each of you can take a go at that one and see if you come up with anything different. Who wants to go first?
I'll let Ida go first, perhaps.
Thanks, Mert. I think one thing that Mert mentioned earlier, and in particular for startups, I think this is key, is really establishing what is your intended use. What do you want to do? What is your product? How do you want to help? What is the pain problem you're wanting to resolve or develop, etc. I think understanding that really helps the team to therefore have huge focus. As I joined, we had pivoted to focus on the current pandemic, but we also had a lot of other things going on, a lot of very good things going on. And one of the things I think I would have done slightly differently is communicate even more, in particular as we were in the remote setting, not just internally, but also externally, about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that you really have gone for a full company vision to find resolve for the pandemic we all share the pain of. And so many other things that you may have been involved with may be impacted by this, as the world has been impacted by it, but try to be mindful and patient about that and really just continue to communicate it. I think that's been really tricky, in particular because we're remote, but also because it was a new and extreme scenario to have been faced with in terms of COVID. But I think that would be the only thing, because everything else, heart and soul, focus, energy, the team have given it absolutely everything. And we really feel warm-hearted by the fact that we have managed to be of help. I think that's been really key for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if I can add one thing to that in terms of any small piece of advice that I can provide, and particularly because I've seen how slow things move in the healthcare space. How slow the changes. That once you start talking to a healthcare system or a life science company, to go from the initial discussion to actually deploying something of value and meaningful, it takes a long time. And all I can say is that we've been really lucky because we had investors who shared that long-term vision. And I don't think we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. So I think having investors and partners that are backing you and believing in that long-term vision. So as a startup, choosing those right partners is absolutely key. And of course, you know, the navigation within this healthcare system is quite complex. And I think going back to, you know, organizations like MedCity and London Partners, I think leveraging that as much as possible during that navigation process is essential.
Fantastic. Well, what a fantastic sum up actually to that. And I think we could have another webinar exclusively on investors and choosing the right investors, but we'll save that perhaps for another time. Well, we have sort of come to the end of our webinar, and I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to sum up, you know, some key things that struck out to me. I think we've covered a lot actually, and I think what's really been striking is the sort of relationships and the partnerships that you've built that has really added an advantage to you. I think that you an advantage in a number of ways, I think, and you talked about the healthcare system and the geography being a test bed, and what I heard was, you know, some of that has allowed you to open doors and have dialogues with others, not only in the UK but internationally, and I think that that's a really important message that I've heard. The other thing is around also diversity in data. And those are elements I think are really important to innovative technologies and companies that are looking to scale moving forward. And I'm really pleased to hear that through some of the work that you've been doing, you've been able to access that, but not only access that, but work with collaborators to form new frameworks and do research that informs different ways of working. And I think that that's really powerful if you're a company that is truly wanting to change the space in digital and AI. And I think the other thing also, let's not forget this community feel, because that is so important as us as human beings who are desperately trying to get back into a frame of work that involves interaction. And okay, we were able to do it virtually and we had to over the last year, but you know, that I think is slowly coming back, and I think will just strengthen things even further. And then just some of the things from your advice: having the purpose, having a strong vision, being able to articulate that, choosing the right investors, and being able to navigate. I think what I heard as being your key messages to some of the organizations that are listening here, hopefully. So with that, I wanted to thank you very much indeed for your time today. I really enjoyed the conversation. And for those in the audience, thank you for your questions. And we will be recording this, so if you miss bits of it or you want to share it, then I'm sure you'll get access to it. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Neelam.
Take care. Bye-bye.